Are you truly prepared for the truth? Because the truth, darling, is a blunt instrument, and it's about to shatter the glass house of the Miller family's supposed morality. How far would you go to protect the memory of a man who gave you everything? What happens when the person who should be your biggest ally turns out to be the serpent in your garden? You think you know what greed looks like, but I promise you, you've never seen it quite this beautiful, this elegantly dressed, or this utterly venomous. My name is Sarah Miller, and this is my story of a betrayal so deep, it could only be paid back with a vengeance so precise, it could only be called justice. Before we unlock this vault of secrets, do yourself a favor. Click the button, subscribe to Behind Closed Doors, and smash that notification bell. Trust me, you don't want to miss the fallout from this one. The title of my story is The Fake Will and the Antique Warehouse Flip. Let me take you back to the day I lost everything and found my reason to fight. They say grief is a quiet visitor. Mine was a raging fire, fueled by the stale scent of mothballs and the echo of my grandfather's absence. Arthur Miller, the greatest man I'd ever known, had been in the ground for exactly 4 days when my sister-in-law, Teresa, decided it was time to collect. The old man's warehouse was his sanctuary, a cavern of forgotten furniture, old blueprints, and the rich, dusty smell of history. Now, it was a battleground. Teresa stood in the exact center of the main floor, a stark contrast to the beautiful decay around her. She was wearing a cream-colored Gucci trench coat, the kind that screamed new money and bad taste, and it looked ridiculously out of place against the backdrop of my grandpa's dusty, worn leather wingback chairs. The air was thick with the dust motes dancing in the single shaft of sunlight slicing through a high window, and the tension between us was so heavy it felt physical. She flicked her wrist, and the paper she was holding, crisp, clean, and horribly final, crinkled. So the lawyers ironed out the details, she purred, her voice too sweet, like cheap frosting. Grandpa Arthur left everything to me. I didn't move. I felt the blood draining from my face. Everything? What are you talking about, Teresa? I whispered, the warehouse swallowing my voice. The warehouse, the stocks, the accounts, even that hideous old clock, she said, waving the document again. It was official. It looked legal. It looked fake. The latest will, guess he finally realized who his real family was. She gave me a sickly smile, a shark's grin. That's a lie. He would never exclude me, I challenged, trying to find the crack in her composure. Oh, but he did, sweetie. He updated it right before he... You know, he said, and I quote, Teresa knows how to handle an asset like this. Sarah is too sentimental. Sad, but true. Now, she took a step toward the door, her expensive heels clicking on the rough concrete floor. Pack your things, Sarah. You're yesterday's news. This warehouse is my ticket out of this dump. She spoke the words dump, as if the building that contained the last 50 years of my grandfather's life was a piece of trash. That was the line, not the will, but the insult to his legacy. You can't sell this, I said, my voice hardening. It's his life. You can't just flip it. She laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. Oh, honey, I already did. Hudson Developers is buying the lot. They're leveling it next week to build condos. So, get out of my $1,000,000 dustbin. A cold certainty settled in my gut, replacing the shock. This wasn't about money for her, not entirely. It was about erasure. I just stood there, speechless, the silence of the massive room suddenly amplifying the ticking of that hideous old clock she mentioned. I looked down at my hand. My fist was clenched around the small, weathered brass keychain my grandfather had slipped into my palm in the hospital. Hold on to this, Sarah. The real key doesn't always open the door, but it will show you what you need to see. His words echoed. I knew, in that moment of absolute defeat, that the battle had just begun. I wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not without a fight. My surrender was just a tactical retreat. This was no longer about a warehouse. It was about honoring the clue he'd left me, a final, silent whisper from the grave. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but mine started brewing in a lukewarm downtown Chicago coffee shop, the kind with exposed brick and ridiculously overpriced lattes. I felt like a fraud sitting there, holding a manila folder filled with my grandfather's entire life, now just an asset, according to Teresa's forged papers, waiting for my old classmate Ethan Cole. Ethan was a sharp young lawyer, all clean lines and expensive suits. But the circles under his eyes told a story of brutal billable hours. He finally slid into the booth across from me, his expression guarded. "So, let's see this death sentence," he said, taking a sip of his black coffee. I slid the supposed will across the table. He skimmed it, his eyes moving like a train tracker. I watched his face, praying for a flicker of doubt, a sign of sloppy forgery. "The signature looks authentic, Sarah," he finally admitted, leaning back with a sigh that carried the weight of legal precedent. "The notarization is solid. To contest this, we need physical evidence of another, legitimate will or absolute proof this one is fake. A handwriting expert will cost a fortune, and right now, all we have is your word against a beautifully executed fraud." I felt the walls closing in again. I was fighting the system now, not just one greedy woman. "So I lose everything just like that? His legacy?" I asked, the desperation stinging my eyes. Ethan shook his head gently. "It's going to be a long, ugly battle, and Teresa knows it. She wants you to fold." He was right. And less than 12 hours later, she proved his point with a chilling phone call. My phone buzzed while I was staring blankly at the eviction notice taped to my apartment door. "Teresa?" I took a deep breath. "Hello? Did you really think a back alley lawyer could save your sorry ass, Sarah?" Her voice was low and silky like a predator circling. "I'm giving you a courtesy call. Drop this. Stop playing your childish games. I've already contacted my firm. You keep pursuing this, and I'll sue you for defamation and harassment. I'll make sure you lose your little apartment, your reputation, everything. Is a dusty old warehouse really worth being blacklisted in this city?" She was trying to break me psychologically, making me question my own morality. Was I being the greedy one? No, I wasn't fighting for money. I was fighting for the memory of a man who deserved better than being bulldozed for condos. The call snapped something inside me. I was done being the victim. Teresa was wrong about one thing. The warehouse was worth everything. That little brass key on my palm suddenly felt warm, a silent promise. I didn't need a lawyer to break into the past. I needed courage. That night, under a sky as black and unforgiving as Teresa's heart, I drove my beat-up sedan back to the warehouse. The air was cold, smelling of rain and the impending doom of a wrecking ball. I parked blocks away and slipped through a gap in the chain-link fence. This wasn't professional. It was primal. All I carried was my phone, a rusty old flashlight, and Arthur's brass keychain. "Focus, Sarah. The key doesn't open the door. It shows you what you need to see." I clicked the flashlight on. The beam was weak, dancing over the enormous stacks of antiques, turning shadows into monsters. I spent an hour tracing his favorite spots, running my hands along the spines of dusty books, searching for hidden drawers or false panels. Nothing. Just the slow, mournful tick-tock of the old clock. Defeat tasted like rust and failure. I was about to give up, to let Teresa win, when I heard a small clink. The keychain had slipped from my numb fingers, dropping onto the floor. I knelt down, the beam of my flashlight following the sound. The brass key hadn't landed on the rough concrete. It had landed right on the edge of a barely visible, hair-thin seam in the Persian rug, exactly where the floorboards met. I picked up the key, then traced the seam with my finger. Underneath the century-old, moth-eaten rug, there was a small, almost imperceptible notch in the floor. A floorboard, slightly recessed. He didn't leave a lock, he left a mark. My heart hammered against my ribs. I dropped the flashlight, grabbed the nearest tool, an antique letter opener, and started working the wood. I was inches away from either a fortune or just more dust. The wood finally creaked. The board lifted. The wood gave way with a noise that sounded like a cough in the vast, silent warehouse. I froze, listening. Nothing. Just the wind whistling a lonely tune through the broken pane of glass near the rafters. I took a breath, pushed my heart back down to a manageable rhythm, and yanked the board up. There was no stack of cash, no dusty alternative will. The space wasn't deep, maybe 4 inches, and nestled inside, wrapped tightly in oilskin, was a large rolled-up sheet of thick, brittle parchment. It felt heavy, not like paper, but like a secret preserved for decades. I unrolled it under the weak, shaky light of my phone. It wasn't a document. It was a blueprint. Massive, detailed, meticulously drawn. A complex architectural rendering of several towering, connected structures. A cityscape. My training as an interior designer immediately kicked in. The style, the lines, the signature at the bottom. It was undeniably Arthur Miller's hand. But this wasn't furniture design. This was high-stakes, big-city architecture, and it looked like the master plan for something monumental. This is it. This is his clue. But what the hell did it mean? I didn't know if I had found a treasure map or just an expensive piece of kindling. I called Ethan before the sun came up, my voice ragged with a mixture of exhaustion and adrenaline. He was annoyed, then intrigued, then utterly silent, as I described the blueprint. "Meet me at Professor Evans' office. Now. Don't tell anyone." Professor Evans was an architectural historian at the university, an old friend of Grandpa Arthur, and he had the kind of academic gravitas that scared lawyers. We met in a reading room heavy with the scent of aged paper. I laid the blueprint out. The professor adjusted his spectacles, leaned in close, and his hands began to tremble. "My God," he murmured, tracing a line with a reverent finger. "Sarah, do you know what this is?" "A blueprint?" I asked, feeling stupid. "This isn't a blueprint." "This is the blueprint," he corrected, his voice hushed. "This is the original, never-before-seen design for the Lakefront Towers complex, the $100 million USD project that dominates the Chicago skyline. The official records credit 2 other architects. Miller was supposedly just a draftsman. They stole it. They stole his design, his genius, and his reputation." He looked up at me, his eyes wide with historical outrage. "Sarah, this isn't just a blueprint. This is $100 million in stolen legacy. Your grandpa was robbed." The number hit me like a physical blow. Not the dollar amount, but the word, legacy. Teresa hadn't just tried to steal money. She had nearly destroyed the one thing Grandpa cherished most, the proof of his brilliance. The realization hit me like a revelation, piecing the puzzle together instantly. Teresa didn't want this building because of a fake will. Teresa wanted to level the building because she was terrified that the real will, or something equally incriminating, was hidden inside. She didn't know about the blueprint. Her fear was the weapon I needed. My hands stopped shaking. The fear was gone. The victim was gone. Pawn to queen. I finally had a move. I called Ethan back, my voice cool, level, and utterly detached. "Forget contesting the will, Ethan. We're going to use it. Teresa doesn't know what I found. We're not suing her. We're going to let her believe she won the cheap game. And then we're going to play the one she didn't even know existed." I could hear him scribbling notes on the other end. "She thinks I'm sentimental. She thinks I'm weak. We're going to use her greed and her arrogance as the perfect trap. We change tactics now. I'm going to call her and I'm going to demand payment. I'm going to make her think I have the only thing left that can ruin her. A second, even more valuable artifact. We're going to lure her in, Ethan. We're going to use the lure of a new secret to make her confess to the old one. The power was intoxicating. I was no longer Sarah Miller, the heartbroken granddaughter. I was Sarah Miller, the architect of ruin. The shift in power was palpable, electric. Ethan was cautious. Lawyers always are. But the $100 million figure had put a fire in his belly. "This is dirty, Sarah," he warned, adjusting his tie over the discreet wiring he was setting up. "We're playing her game of extortion." I shrugged, my reflection in the dark cafe window looking sharper, colder than before. "She started it, Ethan. I'm just finishing it." Besides, the truth isn't always clean. Now call Teresa. I dialed her number and listened as the phone rang, timing my heartbeat to the insistent, empty tone. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice clipped and impatient. "Did you finally hire a moving company, Sarah? Because the clock is ticking." My voice was flat, devoid of emotion, a deliberate weapon. "Teresa, I found a second item in the warehouse. Something you missed during your little inspection. It's not the will. It's something much, much bigger. Something that could stop the Hudson deal dead in its tracks and tie up the estate in litigation for a decade." I let the silence hang there, letting her greed chew on the bait. "Hook, you're bluffing," she hissed, but the silkiness was gone, replaced by raw anxiety. "Am I? Think about it. Why was Arthur so eager to leave you a dusty old building? Maybe he knew this one little item would make the whole thing worthless. I want $50,000 in unmarked bills. Tonight. Or I call Hudson developers, and I tell them exactly why that warehouse is worth more than just empty real estate." I named a ridiculously low sum, enough to seem desperate, but small enough for her to handle quickly. She tried to negotiate, to bluster, to threaten, but I held the line, repeating the amount and the location. The dark, deserted parking lot behind the old merchandise mart. This is the first time I felt true power. The confession ran through my mind. The power of having the right information at the right time. The victim was setting the trap. The tension, when she finally arrived, was so thick I could almost taste it. Metallic and bitter. She pulled up in a sleek black SUV, the kind that whispered luxury but screamed, "Look at me." She got out, clutching a small, fat envelope, her face a mask of furious calculation under the single, weak yellow glow of the street lamp. "Where is it?" she demanded, skipping the pleasantries. She threw the envelope at my chest. It bounced off and landed on the dirty asphalt. I didn't even flinch. "First, I need to know the truth, Teresa," I stated, keeping my tone deliberately calm. "Why the fake will? Why all the drama? You could have just asked for money." She laughed, a manic, high-pitched sound of pure contempt. "You want a confession? Fine. Yes, I altered the damned will. The old fool never liked me. He was going to give everything to some ridiculous charity. He didn't want you to have it, but he definitely didn't want me to have it. So I fixed his mistake. And you were just the convenient idiot to pin the blame on. Now, the package." Her face was red, sweat glistening under the street lamp. She'd gone full villain, and Ethan was recording every single syllable. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small wooden cigar box, worn and innocuous, just like the floorboard. I held it out to her. She snatched it open violently. It was empty. She stared at me, then at the empty box, her jaw slack with disbelief. What is this? A joke?" That was my cue. Ethan stepped out from the deep shadow of the pillar, holding a small digital recorder. "Lies and arrogance are powerful poisons, Teresa. Now they're yours." "No joke, Teresa," I said, my voice gaining strength. "That box contained nothing, just like your conscience. But Ethan here. He recorded everything you just said. The admission of fraud, the theft, the malicious intent." Her eyes darted between the recorder and my face. But I wasn't finished. This wasn't just about her crime. It was about Arthur. I didn't need to find your fake will, Teresa. I found the real one. And the real key. Arthur left the warehouse to me, free and clear, just like he always intended. But that's just the paper. The real treasure. I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle on her collapsing world. Was the blueprint, the original design for the lakefront towers. $100 million architectural legacy you almost bulldozed for pocket change. Arthur was a genius. You're just a thief. Teresa Miller, the high society queen, crumbled. She lunged at me, tears streaming down her face, screaming, "You ruined my family! You little manipulative snake!" I held my ground. The family was ruined the minute you decided greed was the better choice. You just hammered the final nail. The screech of Teresa's tires fading into the Chicago night was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It wasn't just the end of a confrontation. It was the sound of a parasite being ripped from its host. Ethan called the police immediately, presenting them with the wire recording, the forged will, and the undeniable evidence of the lakefront tower's blueprint. He handled the legal filings with the efficiency of a highly competent man, finally working on a case he genuinely believed in. I just stood there, leaning against my car, watching the red and blue lights flash in the distance as the justice system finally began to churn. I was exhausted, exhilarated, and entirely clean. I had played the villain's game, but I had won by honoring my grandfather's truth, not by succumbing to malice. Teresa was indicted on multiple counts of probate fraud and grand larceny. The evidence was overwhelming, thanks to her own furious confession and the physical proof of the blueprint. The social fallout was swift and spectacular. The woman who had obsessed over appearances and luxury found herself on the front page of the papers, stripped of her facade, exposed as a petty, desperate criminal. It was satisfying, yes, but it wasn't the goal. The goal was always the legacy. With the legal battle finally settled, the warehouse officially mine, and the fake will dismissed, I focused on the true prize, Arthur's reputation. I didn't send the lakefront blueprint to the developers to demand $100 million. That would have made me just another version of Teresa. Instead, I established the Arthur Miller Architectural Legacy Fund. The purpose was to provide scholarships for disadvantaged students interested in urban design, and its inaugural funding came from the lawsuit settlements I secured from the architectural firm that had originally plagiarized his work decades ago. That felt like real retribution. The final piece was the warehouse itself. It was no longer a dump or a dustbin. It was sacred ground. I didn't sell it. I spent months restoring it, pouring my knowledge and my heart into the project. I stripped away the grime, revealed the magnificent industrial bones, and turned the front half into my own interior design studio, Arthur's Studio. The back half, I dedicated it to a community arts center, fulfilling a dream my grandfather had quietly harbored. A place where creation, not just collection, could thrive. The transformation was my personal catharsis, my competence porn moment, the demonstration that skill and honor always trumped greed. I even handled the loose ends of my immediate family. My parents, who had always been distant and easily swayed by Teresa's manipulative charm. They had believed her lies, seeing me as the petty, jealous relative. I sent them a copy of the real will and a small anonymous check from the legacy fund. It was a silent message. I forgive you for your weakness, but I will not forget your doubt. I kept my distance. The cost of reconciliation with people who had so easily believed I was a pawn was too high. One quiet afternoon, I sat at the custom-made desk in my new studio, the sun streaming through the newly polished industrial windows. On the corner of the heavy oak desk sat Arthur's brass keychain, now an honored relic. It hadn't unlocked a vault of gold. It had unlocked my potential. It had shown me the difference between having power and being powerful. The chaos was over. The order was restored. I was no longer the broke, humiliated niece. I was Sarah Miller, founder, architect, and protector of a rightful legacy. The queen had risen, not by demanding a crown, but by earning it, one meticulous, vengeful step at a time. The final question remained: what did I learn from the whole ugly, beautiful fight? I sit here now, surrounded by the quiet hum of success, the smell of fresh sealant and aged wood, a stark contrast to the dust and despair of that first day. The brass keychain is cool against my palm. A permanent reminder. People look at my studio, at the press coverage, at the foundation's work, and they call it luck. They say I stumbled into a fortune. They're wrong. I call it learning to look beyond the obvious. The greatest treasures, the most powerful truths, are rarely shiny or loud. They are the subtle clues that love and intention leave behind. They are always hidden in plain sight, waiting for the person willing to get their hands dirty. My fight against Teresa taught me that vulnerability is only a weakness if you don't weaponize the truth hidden underneath it. If you're out there right now, feeling like the pawn in your own life, maybe your coworker stole your idea, your sibling took advantage of your kindness, or you're being pushed out of your inheritance, I want you to hear this. The most powerful secret you possess is often the one they're trying hardest to bury. Your anger is not weakness. It's a compass pointing towards the injustice you need to correct. Don't chase their lies. Chase your truth. Because when you finally uncover that secret, when you finally find your own brass keychain, you realize you were never a pawn. You were the queen, patiently waiting for the right moment to make your move. I used my skills, my grief, and my grandfather's blueprint to rewrite my future and reclaim his name. You have skills and strengths too. Start small. Start by refusing to let them define your worth. The power is already under your feet. You just have to be brave enough to pry up the floorboards. This entire journey, from humiliation to triumph, is dedicated to those who need to know they aren't alone in the fight. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like the underdog fighting the whole rigged game, then you are officially part of the Behind Closed Doors family. Let me know in the comments, what is your brass keychain? What small overlooked detail did someone use to hurt you? And how are you going to use it to heal yourself? Like this video, share it with someone who needs a little queen energy today. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Behind Closed Doors and hit that notification bell. I'll be back next week with another true tale of scandal and sweet strategic revenge. Until then, remember, look closely. The blueprint for victory is always there.